I always see resilience as not that you're not feeling the emotions, you are, but that you're able to make space for them and accept that they're there and still choose what you want to do with your life.
Dr Beth Godwin is a clinical psychologist, working at the intersection of mental health, resilience, and our relationship with food and body.
I suppose a doctor would call them diagnoses. I would probably just call them living life as a human. How your relationship with the food is worse than what you put in your mouth.
Moving forward, what are the biggest psychological challenges for the human population?
I suppose one of the things...
Resilience, food, social media, loneliness, and the psychology shaping what comes next.
Hello humans, welcome to the M-Word podcast brought to you by Martin. Today I'm joined by Beth, Dr Beth Godwin. Thank you for joining me. Godwin. What did I say? Godwin. All right, sorry,
Everybody
I did.
does that.
All right, my fault. Welcome, thank you for joining me. Perhaps just to set the scene perhaps a little bit for listeners, just a bit about your background and the area you specialise in, and then we can dig into all things psychology.
Okay. So I'm Dr Beth Godwin, and I'm a clinical psychologist and a certified intuitive eating counsellor as of this year. Okay. Finally did the exams, even though I've been practicing it probably for a long time and doing it with clients for a long time. I finally went for the certificate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and you Manx originally?
I'm not Manx.
Okay.
So I'm from Bolton, just outside Manchester.
Okay.
And then moved here when I was 10 years old.
Oh, okay.
So I've been here a long time.
Manx
now.
enough?
Yeah, Manx enough.
Okay.
Adopted.
What drew you to psychology?
Probably a lot of things. My mum was a psychiatric nurse, so as I was growing up, I saw her coming home from work and heard a little bit about her day, but obviously not a lot with the confidentiality. And then as you kind of go through life, you start to realise you're the person that people come to with their problems.
Okay.
Which was always something that I liked helping people with. So I was pretty set on I was going to help people in the mental health field. And originally thought I would follow in my mum's footsteps and I would train to be a mental health nurse. Mm-hmm. And she said, absolutely no way.
Oh, okay.
She said, too much responsibility and far too little pay.
Oh, okay.
So try again. And I actually went to work in mental health at about 18, I think, and did the work of a healthcare assistant with the nurses and with the psychiatrists. And while I was in that field, I thought, actually, I really like therapy and I really want to be a psychologist. So from that point on, it was decided that's what I was going to do.
Was that work at 18 on Ireland or off
Yeah,
Ireland?
on Ireland.
Okay.
So it was, it's called Manannan Court now. It used to be called Graniot Court before that. And obviously Ballymona is probably what most people would call it before that. So I worked on the wards in the hospital for quite a few years as a healthcare assistant, and then became an assistant psychologist on the island, and then went off and did my training.
And how was that? Obviously, I assume at 18 it's fairly eye-opening.
Yeah, looking back, I probably think I wasn't ready to be faced with probably people who are at their most unwell. Mm-hmm. But, you learn as you go, as you do on most jobs, and you find out what your skills are and what your strengths are. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I loved the staff. I loved the people we got to work with and the relationships that you formed. It was great.
Yeah, I imagine you were very stretched at a young age then, kind of outside your comfort zone. So the studying aspects then, does that start as obviously on job, but then out of hours, etc.? And
yeah, so the training to become a psychologist is quite lengthy, really. So it's 3 years degree level, and then to get onto the clinical psychology doctorate, they expect you to have quite a lot of experience behind you.
So like hours? That, like a pilot?
Yeah. So I finished my degree and came back to the island and picked up where I left off and carried on working at the hospital. And then I got a role as an assistant psychologist here. And that gave me the experience because I was doing more therapy sessions, traditional therapy sessions with people that gave me the experience to get onto the clinical doctorate course, which is a further 3 years to become a doctor in clinical psychology. It's quite a tough process. I think where I was applying, there was a 5% chance of getting on the course any of the years to apply. So a lot of people spend 2, 3, 5, 7 years applying again and again just to get themselves to a place where they've got enough experience to get on.
Yeah. And just to not change subject slightly, but so my mum was a nurse, and what she worked at hospice in her later life, and what always amazed me was her ability when she came home to be able to detach from work, which, look, we all have to do it in some different form, whatever kinds of different stress, but when you're seeing humans under duress and they're having to step out of that, and you've got kids, family, husband, wife, how's your ability? Well, obviously got an ability. Is that something you've worked on? Is that something that came naturally, be able to kind of seeing your mum do it, perhaps? I don't know.
Worked on, I think. Okay. I think at the start, if I look back now, I would leave work and I would think about people, and I would think, what were they doing while I wasn't there, and how could I help them tomorrow? And it probably would stay in my head a lot longer back then, before I had the experience that I have now. A lot of the training in this area is, how do you look after yourself?
Oh, interesting.
If you're going to help other people, how do you stay in a position that you can do that? So we had a lot of lectures on self-care and resilience and maintaining your own mental health. So now probably my hobbies are what keeps me focused. I get home and I pick up my hobbies and I focus on those.
Yep.
Not to say I don't think about the people that I see, because I do quite often. I think, I need to speak to them about that, and I need to bring this up next time. But you do develop an ability to say, okay, I need to put that down now.
Yeah.
And I always say to my clients, everything I talk to them about, I've maybe tried, or I've had asked of me to do, or it was in my training, and they send you away to practice it. And a lot of that with the mindfulness aspect is about, okay, when your mind is going somewhere that might be unhelpful right now, how do you bring it back?
Bring it back, yeah. Interesting. We'll dig into mindfulness. Just on the resilience side, it's a very subject I love talking about. So that like you use the word resilience there, how so you talk about extracting yourself from the job or the mind of it by doing other things, but then building it. How would you, if you reflect, and people listening, what you're doing to build that resilience up for what you need? Because obviously resilience comes in many different formats.
Yeah, and people think about it in a lot of different ways, and I think it means something different to everybody. I always see resilience as not that you're not feeling the emotions, you are, but that you're able to make space for them and accept that they're there and still choose what you want to do with your life. That's what resilience probably means to me, is you still have the feelings, but they don't control you.
Yeah, okay.
You're the one that's in the driving seat.
So when we look at mindfulness, I assume that's a strong link into that mindfulness, to be able to process the thoughts that are going on and deal with them, move them, etc. Yeah,
it's very much part of, I don't know if you've heard of acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a form of therapy that does include a lot of mindfulness aspects with it, and the idea is the acceptance part is, life comes with pain for all of us, and to be able to accept that pain is going to be there sometimes, and still commit fully to the life that you want to lead and do the things that you want to do whilst that's there. So, balancing both.
And that aspect of the pain in those scenarios, are they from, this could come with pain? So I guess you might get into a relationship, and if you've had poor relationships before, it's like, don't undercommit because someone else is, because of the pain of previous relationships, for example.
Yeah. What do you want your life to be? Do you want to stay in that place where you don't open up and you don't let the walls down, and does that work for you? And if that works for you, then fine. But if you're saying it doesn't work for you, then you're going to continue the pain rather than accept that it's there and still choose the life that you want.
Okay. So before there's so much we can talk about in psychology, but maybe just set the scene with I called it, when we were chatting before we came on air, I called it Psychology 101. Obviously, there's different areas and areas you specialise in. So maybe for listeners, like, just the most basics, what we talk about when we talk about psychology, and then perhaps the different fields that are around, and then we can obviously dig into your particular expertise.
There are so many specialisms. I probably won't name them all and can't name them all. But obviously there's like sports psychology, there's organizational psychology, there's more the business side, there's like psychology and human resources, there's all sorts of psychologies, I guess now. My specialism has always been mental health, so anxiety, depression, all of those kind of, I suppose a doctor would call them diagnoses, I would probably just call them living life as a human. And then latterly, I suppose my biggest specialism has been in like relationship with food and with body. It had been a specialism in the past. I suppose it's worth going back. I did work in the NHS when I first qualified. And I worked in the community team, and then I worked in CAMS later on. And while I was in CAMS, I worked with eating disorders, and I would also do what they call the Fussy Eaters Clinic in paediatrics with one of the dietitians there. So that really sparked my interest into how we behave around food and how we feel about our bodies. And then when I left CAMS, I set up privately, and a lot of that work dropped off because eating disorders need a team often. They're quite a serious thing to be living with. So when I set up my private practice, it was something that I still loved, but I didn't have really the opportunity to do it as much as I had before. So when COVID hit and everybody dropped off the planet, I had some time on my hands, and I thought I really miss doing that. And I'd spent quite a few years doing kind of bodybuilding and, weightlifting and controlling my diet and doing all of this sort of stuff. And it really sparked my interest when we all went into our houses. We could no longer access a gym. Everybody on social media was talking about weight gain, and it got me reignited of I need to go back to that. Yeah. So I went back and did some further study in eating disorders again. And when I met back up with my clients, when we all came back to the world, the clients that were coming with difficulties with food or difficulties with their bodies, I said, I'm really going to do something with this. Like I'm gonna start something with this. And then, like the rest of us, just got bogged down back into normal life. And then a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with ME, and as well as POTS later on, and I was told I needed to slow down. So I reduced a lot of my working hours, but I really, really missed helping people as much as I was before. So I've had to do a complete rethink of how can I still be helping people whilst I'm not overdoing it. And that's when I've gone into the online space, and all those clients that I said, I will do something with this, I've finally gotten around to it because I have the space for it. And that's my specialism now, is working in the food and body space. Okay.
And most of your work is online now, is it? Or
it's probably about half and half now. Roughly, probably because I am limited to the amount of people that I can see because of my health condition now. So when I've got those other hours, then I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah, okay.
So it was at the start of this year, I got the real push and like set up my social media and put myself out into that online space. It had always been in the back of my head, but the start of this year was like, right, let's do it.
Yeah. And if you don't mind tell me to go away. Your personal health challenge. You said POC there, did you?
POTS.
What's POTS? What's that? You don't mind me asking.
Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome.
I thought so.
So it basically means that my body does not like gravity.
Okay.
Obviously a lot more complex than that, but that's how I like to describe it, is when you stand up, your body makes certain changes so that your blood can still pump around your body. Mine doesn't.
Oh, okay.
So when I stand up, my blood goes to my boots and it struggles to get back out of there.
Oh, okay.
So my heart rate elevates quite a lot to try and compensate. So they tend to come together sometimes, some of these disorders. If you've got an autonomic nervous system, which ME is, difficulties, then this is all part of the same system.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow. And is that genetic? Is that common?
They don't really know a lot of the time. It's the same with the ME. they've just found some evidence for genetic links, but I don't know anybody else in my family with it.
Right.
There is some evidence that it can happen post-virally. So when I was working in CAMS, I had a virus that it just felt like an awful flu. You know that flu where you feel like you're going to die? Felt like that flu. And it lasted a couple of weeks, and I went back to work, and I remember one of the nurses said to me, "You shouldn't be here." And I said, "But I feel fine." And she said, "You're going to get post-viral fatigue." And I said, no, don't be so silly. And about a week later, I ended up off again.
Oh, okay.
I just thought I'd got rushed back too soon. And it wasn't until years and years later that the doctors think that developed into my system never recovered.
Right. Oh, wow.
And it just came back and bit me on the arse
Hard.
later on.
And out of interest, can you, with, is there, for the one about, was you able to reverse that, or is that just something you have to now manage the rest of your life?
Some people talk about reversing it, but there is no cure. No known medical cure.
Yeah.
It's more about how you live with it.
Okay.
The difficulty with the two conditions I've got is probably the approach to one worsens the other.
Oh,
so
okay. Oh,
with
interesting. Or not.
PARTS, they recommend kind of exercise, is it graded? It kind of is graded, yeah, where you do certain things and it will help your circulatory system and your nervous system to cope. Whereas with ME, if I do exercise, it worsens my ME. Right. So it's a very tricky balance between the two of them. Yeah.
And you mentioned, I wouldn't say one comes with the other, but it's not uncommon for the...
Not uncommon.
I should open these hobnobs, by the way, that you bought.
I mean...
Everyone can listen to us eat.
POTS can come on its own. It can come with other conditions. It's not necessarily just with ME, but for me it is.
Yeah, right. I've never heard of it before. Not that I'm any medical doctor, but...
It's been around for a while, right. But I think people are just starting to hear more about it. Or I remember when it was explored with my doctor, he was saying, yeah, we've heard about it for years, but there seems to be a bit more light on it lately, that people are hearing about it and probably getting the diagnosis because it's becoming more known.
You mentioned about mental health, obviously a massive subject that we could, I'm sure, spend a month talking about.
Yeah.
I guess an area maybe just to briefly chat about. It's obviously a very, and rightly so, prominent area at the moment. We also talked about resilience earlier, and do you think there's a need? Maybe that's quite the wrong question, but like, what? So I'm a believer that like your mental health starts with you. You're ultimately responsible for that, and it can obviously overwhelm you without a doubt. But you've got to take some ownership of that yourself, whether that's through what you do day to day, in relationships you have, in work, out work, family, etc. But obviously everyone's tolerance to that varies, hence there's this scale of people who are, I suppose, ultra resilient and will never have mental health challenges to the people on the other end, and then the ability on that scale for people to talk about that. So, and certainly something I've obviously I suppose it's not obvious maybe if you're not listening or looking for it, but the ability for people to talk about it has opened up massively, as it should, over the last number of years. And places like I listen to a lot of work around that as well. So have you seen that in your field then? And would you say you maybe see, do you get to, I wouldn't say see more referrals, but you get more, it's just more, I sometimes feel people might use language like there's more people with mental health challenges. But is the question maybe just more people are willing to talk about it now? So they had it before, but they just weren't willing to talk about it. And just what?
Yeah, I would go back to your original statement about individual responsibility. I think there is a lot of individual responsibility placed on us in the Western world. When you actually look at the psychology of how we cope with things, I think individual responsibility is a part, but I don't think it's as big as we make it out to be.
Oh, okay.
I always give my clients the analogy of a plant. So if you have a plant in a room and the plant is doing its best to grow, like that's what it wants to do. It wants to feel its best. It wants to grow and do all of those things, just like humans. But if you don't feed that plant, and if you put that plant in the dark and you make it really cold, there is no matter what that plant does to try and grow, it can't do that. And I think it's the same for humans. If we put humans in really difficult situations, poverty or social injustice or, racism or whatever it might be, if we put people in situations like that where there's stigma, I think one of the stats that I was looking at recently for psychosis is how strongly it is linked to poverty or the inability to access education. Or I suppose with the stuff that I do with people, like weight stigma is a huge part of it. So the attitudes of people towards others, that they're discriminated against, they don't get paid as much, they don't get the same opportunities. I don't understand how that plant can grow when you're in that environment. Yeah. So whilst I see people on an individual basis and we do the best we can with their resilience, a lot of the time we're looking at what environmentally do we have control over here so that we can make your environment better. So when you have got all the skills and you want to develop and grow, you're in the right place for that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. You mentioned in there, and it's a question, you love this question. So I asked ChatGPT to read key psychological documents for the last century.
Oh God!
And
This is a test.
Papers. No, not all. No, not all. And the papers on and asked it, moving forward, what are the biggest psychological challenges for the human population? And just ask for the top 3 answers. I'm not going to say what they are. Sorry, I'm not going to quiz you on what they are because that's not fair. But it talks around the first one was the psychology around. It talks about mental health. It was talking about mental health, hence the discussion a moment ago. But around the social media and the impact that's having on the world ultimately. Views.
I suppose one of the things that we're really good at as humans is comparison. We go, next door's got that. Oh, I quite like that. I want that. Or why have they got that and I've not got that? And we have, more people than we used to have to be able to make those comparisons with now because of social media, and we can see other people's lives.
If you go back in history, and I tend to think what we do as humans are obviously based, and I go back to caveman days where a lot of what we do now is based on tribes, etc. What in our DNA wants us to be better than our neighbour? That's the thing I struggle with, because I'm like, I guess in the tribe formats, obviously you're fighting for land but
survival.
Yeah, okay.
If you've got the better cave, the better fire, the better access to food,
the better selfie,
you're more likely to survive.
Yeah, so it's just hardwired in from there.
Yeah, that's our brain and our body's number one priority is survival.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered they got a nice fire and nicer cave. But yeah.
Yeah, well, you've got more people in your tribe, so therefore if something attacks, you're more likely to survive. Yeah, so I want more people to like me because then we're safer.
Oh, yeah, I suppose there's more people in your tribe as well. Yeah. Okay, yeah, interesting.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm right, but that might be a theory.
No, it ties in, yeah. So the second thing it said around the big challenges for the world, and it kind of ties into look, I think social media gets, and at times it gets horrendous beating, doesn't it? At the same time, it does have its benefits. But anyway, moving on, because I'm not here to advocate either way, is the second one was around, I did write it gave me some notes, was lacking community. And again, I suppose it's tying back to social, because you become, and with the AI moving on, where I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago with Elon Musk, and he was saying his belief in 5 years, everything you watch online, everything will be AI generated, and it'll just be that'll be the content.
Oh wow!
So that I mean, somewhat human connections, in my view, is generally getting lost, because obviously everyone's in their phone, which is one thing. Although we are connected better to people, hence probably wouldn't be sat here without that ability to connect to people you don't know. But then there's the disconnect of the people directly around you, and they're saying that would again be a challenge. So I would assume, again, challenges you see in the psychology space is that disconnection and isolation, and then also I guess if you add in the social media bit we talked about before, it just compounds compounds challenges for people.
And I think physical health and mental health are both affected by loneliness. I think I was looking at a study a couple of weeks ago that was saying loneliness is more harmful to health than smoking.
Wow.
Yeah, so if we lose that sense of community, I think we do struggle as humans. And everybody's got different levels of social batteries, so whatever works for individuals. But as a species, I think we need connection on whatever level that is.
I suppose to go back to like caveman, cavewoman days, that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the third thing they were talking about, I did write it down, that was... I'll come back to it. I can't remember what it was. I did write some notes.
Do you want to search?
Yeah, no, change. That's what it was. And just how, like, so obviously, as a species, we're just, the change, I call it change management in business, but change management's hockey stick, isn't it? Because it's just rampant, and they talk a lot about the amount of information and things we try and input now. Our brain's just not developed because it's moved quicker than our brain development has. And that, from a psychological standpoint, everything, again, it's a problem now, but it's just going to, again, hockey stick and get worse.
Yeah. And I wonder whether it's the change or whether it's the impact of the change. You know, going back to the social aspect, do you feel left behind? Do you feel left out? Do you feel lonely that you can't do what other people can do? Particularly, I'm thinking of the older generation, you know, with phones and, you know, can't access the TV because it now works through the internet, or, you know, maybe there's a link there.
Yeah. Okay, food. We mentioned food a couple of times, so let's start high level with that area, especially before we came on air. We'll start with, I mentioned Christy Harrison, and she had a quote, a talk where she talks about the relationship with, our relationship with food's more important than the food itself, which off air I was kind of like, obviously food's really important because you've got to put the right things in your body, but perhaps rather than say that's 90% and 10% is the relationship with it, I guess the conversation is to try and move it the other way around. So talk a bit about that, and obviously the work you do in that space, what you've seen. You talked about it being your passion, and that's the area you're going in. So I'm going to shut up for a while and you go. I'm going to eat hobnobs while you talk.
Fair enough. While we're on the
Thank you for mine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unhealthy, but hey-ho.
I'm not sure where you want me to go with it, but I suppose Christy Harrison's quote with the worrying about what you put in your mouth, I think that is something that is huge in the society that we have at the moment. We're constantly being told what is good food, what is bad food, what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating, and if you do eat those foods, then you're bad, or you should feel some sort of shame around that. And I think that black and white labelling of food is really becoming difficult for people, that we're really worrying about what we're eating.
Do you see a lot of people? Not a lot of people. Do you see people that have those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And it changes. The theme always changes, but there's always something being demonized and always something being glorified. So probably the theme at the moment is protein is glorified. You know, it's a thing that you should have in everything. You know, there's protein water, there's protein sweets. I saw when I was in Walmart last time I was in America. Whereas I suppose carbs are quite often the thing that are demonized, or I think at the moment ultra processed food, and before that it was, you know, how much sugar you're eating, and before that there was a bit of a gluten phase, and before that we were back to carbs, and before that fats, and we just seem to reinvent what's now the bad food, and then people start eliminating it from their diets, and they worry when they do have it. And that quote, I suppose, about how your relationship with the food is worse than what you put in your mouth, is everybody knows stress is bad for mental health. Everybody knows that it's bad for our physical health. But when it comes to food, we seem to forget that, and we seem to solely focus on what the food is rather than what the relationship with food is. So if you're eating a good food or a bad food in inverted commas, but you're constantly worrying about what you're eating, that's going to be doing more damage than that food can ever fix. And I suppose that the headline mentality is a food's either going to kill or cure you. That's what we're getting told constantly. And being in that state of stress is not good for anybody's health at all. And I suppose going back to what I was saying about social determinants, our diet and exercise is a very, very small part of our health. If we actually look at, do we have access to a doctor? You know, are we getting enough food? You know, can we have can we go to a shop and purchase something without having to frantically check the bank account? You know, do we have that financial stability? Do we have a roof over our head? You know, do we have a support network? All of those things impact our health and our mental health way more than our food or our body weight ever can. But as a society, we're all totally focused on food, exercise, and weight. And that's where that poor relationship with food and bodies comes from, is all these messages about what you should and what you shouldn't be doing.
And you mentioned the poor relationship with food. How do you typically see that with someone who comes to you?
It can be different with different people. So some people will come and they are petrified of eating certain foods, whether that's because they think they'll gain weight, or that's because they think it is going to damage their health, or they've been told that it's a bad food and therefore they shouldn't be eating it. That might be one of the cases.
And can I just ask, if you look at someone with perhaps, is it bulimia? Is that the word I'm looking for? Yeah. So this would be, obviously, that it's somewhere on that scale where the relationship with food is...
Not always. There's a difference between an eating disorder, which is where it's diagnosed and they've met certain criteria, and disordered eating. And I think a lot more of us do disordered eating more than we think that we do. So I'll have people who cut things out of their diet completely, like no, I'm not going to have biscuits because biscuits are bad for your health and you shouldn't be eating them. They're full of sugar, so they're out of my diet. And then something else gets added in, and then something else gets added, and their diet becomes restricted and restricted and restricted. Or sometimes I'll have people that come who are chronic dieters who have been on and off diets all of their life, and it doesn't work, and they come to me saying, I don't know how to eat. I just don't know how to eat if I don't have this set of rules. And they want to be able to have a normal relationship, whatever normal may mean, with food. Or some people will come and they'll say, I have no off switch. Like, I don't know when to stop. You know, if you put food in front of me, I'm never full, and I don't know what to do with that. So it can be all number of things, I suppose, that can impact on your relationship with food.
So then the work done there is about reframing that, understanding why that's happening, and then reframing it moving forward. Yes,
absolutely. I use the framework of intuitive eating, and intuitive eating is 10 principles of what you help people to learn to rebuild their relationship with food. You don't have to do them all in order, it's not that strict. But interestingly, nutrition, you know, actually what's in the food and different nutrients is the very last principle. We don't talk about it really at all throughout the therapy until the end. It might come up earlier, but what tends to happen when I'm seeing people, if they've got a difficult relationship with food, is as soon as you talk about a food having, you know, good nutrients or bad nutrients, they then go back into those, this is good, this is bad, and it becomes a set of rules again. And the whole point of fixing their relationship with food with intuitive eating is that you don't have rules. You get back in touch with the wisdom that is you and your body, and what's good for your body and what feels good in your body, rather than following diet rules.
Can I, maybe for listeners, just to provide, like, I'd almost say real life situation. So, and just, we'll kind of obviously skim through it because we're not sat 10 sessions going through it, but someone comes to you, they've died on, yo-yoed, and the weight goes up, they go on the Atkins, diet comes down, Christmas happens, suddenly it's March again, and they're up again. So I assume that, I guess they're struggling. They kind of maybe, like you say, they perhaps need guardrails constantly to have to what they perceive as healthy, I guess, is somewhat might be body image related, but it could also be they want to feel healthier, perhaps, potentially. So where do you start in that cycle with them? And then just maybe kind of, just walk us through that, like almost a real life situation of how what you do then applies to. Because I'm interested, because I'm a big, obviously food is healthy foods. And I appreciate you're trying to not get focus on the nutrition side of it. But obviously, it's important, clearly,
But it's not the only part of our relationship with food.
So it's interesting to talk about those, because again, I suppose if I look at myself, I think an okay relationship with food, but I'll be one who's not really got an off switch. That in fact, I think about the way I eat now, it's probably because you mentioned before you've seen people like, I just not gone off switch, and I'd argue that's why I have. So
that's really interesting.
Certain switches I've turned off to stop me, I quote, eating unhealthy, because the reality is I will eat more unhealthy, and it is unhealthy, and it is important for my own health long term to be healthier. I wouldn't say I've got a bad relationship with food, but yeah, my coping mechanism for that was to change my lifestyle of eating rather than sort of quote, that was my coping mechanism, I guess. So
really interesting, and I want to pick up on that while you said that about the off switch. We're all born as intuitive eaters. So if you think about when, the baby's there and you've got a bottle, I don't know if you've had that experience, but if you try to continue to feed that baby and it's full, I've had enough. Yeah. I don't want the bottle. And if you try and put it back in, there'll be some resistance because they know they've had enough. And when they're hungry, they cry and they let you know about it. So we're all born with an on switch and an off switch. We are in tune with what our bodies are telling us. And then at some point during our lives, that gets switched off. Or we stop listening.
That's obviously the environment.
Yeah, and maybe switched off is not the right words. Maybe we
dampened down.
Yeah, we stop listening, or we can't hear it anymore. And for some people that I speak to, that might be, in younger years where your parents going, have another bite, just have 2 more bites. Okay. So you're overriding what your body's telling you. Your body's telling you I've had enough, and you're being told just have a bit more, just have a bit more. So you override those signals.
So interestingly, then as an example, my wife and I have had this discussion before, where as a kid, at Sunday dinner, the food would be put in bowls over there and you'd go and pick and you'd take as much as you want.
Yeah.
And second, where she was brought up in a space where the plate was given to her with the food on it.
Yeah.
And I talk about she has an off switch and I don't, and I don't know whether part of that we've talked about that is my off switch is like, well, I'm allowed more.
Yes.
So I'll just take more.
Yes.
And I guess if I go back to, again, caveman days, the key is take while you can. There is hardwired in to store, whether it's in the cave or in your belly.
Yeah. But then we all have that point where we start to feel really uncomfortable and actually I've really had enough and I'm starting to feel a bit sick.
Yeah, it's usually with Chinese food, isn't it? And then you have a bit more and then you have a bit more and then you go, I didn't enjoy that because I ate too much.
Exactly. And then you think, I really need to get control of this. I'm out of control. Yeah. I have no off switch.
Yeah.
Whereas what I tend to teach people is how do we tune in? And it's called introspective awareness. How do we have that awareness again of our internal signals that says, I've had enough. I can get more later. There's no rules around that. That's fine. But right now, I've had enough. So quite often that's what it might look like in real life.
And you're trying to link that back to why that, for them to understand that. So assume if when they're eating in the future, there's a correlation to go, I might be full here. Why don't I feel full? Try and rationalise that or understand where that triggers from to then.
Constantly learning. Yeah. There's sometimes I think, I overdid that. And then I think, well, why did that happen? Oh, well, I didn't eat very much at lunch. So actually I went into that meal much more hungry than I would normally go into a meal because I didn't have that afternoon snack. So it's not about like once you've done it, you tick the boxes and you're done for life. There's this constant learning about what you need and how you respond to those needs. There's something else that you mentioned that I wanted to go back to, and now it's completely fallen out of my head.
My terrible eating habits. What's it to do with my terrible eating habits?
Where do I start was what you asked. And I think going back to that, we were born intuitive eaters, and then at some point we lose that. A lot of where I start is learning about what diet culture is. And diet culture is this belief that we have as a society that thin is better. Whether that's better health-wise, whether that's better morally, attractiveness, whatever it might be, we have this idea as a society that thin is good, fat is bad. And everything that comes with that is then rules about how you should eat, how you should move, what your life should look like. And all of that stuff overrides those intuitive signals. So if you've got a diet that says you can only have this portion, how can you possibly be listening to your body if you're following external rules? So one of the first things that we do is we learn about diet culture. We learn to spot it. So I'm trying to think of an example. Sometimes I play what's called diet culture bingo with people. So as they're going about their lives, when they see an example of diet culture, they go, oh, bingo. And some examples that I've seen recently are the weight loss adverts that are coming up on the run up to Christmas that are saying lose 10 pounds before Christmas, and then at Christmas go wild. And again, it's this,
and that'll be the opposite in January.
yes, absolutely,
new good
that
habits.
you all need to lose weight.
Yeah.
There's this massive focus on weight loss in diet culture, and it keeps you going back to, I need an external framework to control my eating, rather than I have the wisdom, I've just stopped listening.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So tuning back into that wisdom.
Yeah, and realising that diet culture is huge. It's all around us. We're swimming in it, and it's constantly trying to stop us from listening to ourselves. Whether that is, at the minute, it's very much about wellness. A lot of people are talking about, well, to be healthy, you have to be at a certain weight. Well, that's not true. Weight isn't a health. It's not. You can be in a bigger body and you can be healthy. You can be in a small body and be unhealthy. But lots of people don't know that, and we're constantly given these messages about, if you want to be successful, you want to be healthy, then you have to be in a thin body and do all of the things that take you to get thin. And that includes calling foods good or bad, taking them out of your diet, feeling shameful if you do eat them, burning off calories. All of those things are all part of diet culture.
So does that, let's call it rewiring, then by default, if you get, I suppose you get to the end, you may use the 10th principle of, like, is this thing good or bad? Because you've rewired, then that question's just, I assume a different question than perhaps you'd have 10 principles before that.
Yes, absolutely. So, you might be given some chips, and you wouldn't be now thinking of them in the good and bad terms. You would be thinking, will they give me energy? How long do they give me energy for? How full do they make me feel? Do I feel good in my body after I've eaten them, or do I feel bad in my body after I've eaten them? They're no longer about this global labeling that we've got of foods. It's more about the individual and how that food is for them. And sometimes we'll do this work, and at the beginning, when they've been told something is bad, so if I said hobnobs are bad, and somebody came to me and said, I can't eat hobnobs, they're really bad, but I really want hobnobs, and the obsession starts over hobnobs, and when they do have them, they go all in and they eat them all because they're only going to have them this once and they're never going to have them again afterwards. And then you get into this cycle. Whereas when we take out the morality, they're just hobnobs. They're really tasty if you like them. I feel good after I eat them, but I can have them whenever I want, and they're not good, they're not bad, they're just hobnobs. Then you lose that excitement or fear for some people of eating them, and when you do that, we have what's called habituation, where that exciting thing becomes less exciting. So a good example, non-food related, is, the first time you're in a relationship and that person says, I love you, and you think, oh, this is magical, this is wonderful, and it feels amazing. And then 20 years down the line, and they've said it 100 million times, and you think, well, it's lovely, but I no longer have all that excitement and all of that magic that I had at the start. And it's the same when you start to habituate foods. It's the first time you have it, you will think, oh, this is great, I'm finally getting to eat the bad thing. And then as you have it more and more, you think, well, maybe I don't even like them that much. Maybe it was the excitement. And that has happened where I've worked with people and they've gone, I realised I don't actually like that food. I'd rather have X. But the restriction made it exciting.
Okay.
And you
Your
mentioned...
husband will love to know that love's being compared to hobnobs, but carry on.
I'm sure he'd agree. It's fine.
Where's the hobnobs?
One of the other things you mentioned is when people come in and they have been yo-yo dieting. One of the myths that we like to cover in the beginning with diet culture is, we've been sold the myth that weight loss is the best way to health, it's the best way to make all of our lives better. But when we go on diets or when we exercise and burn off foods, what happens, we've seen in the research, is you put the weight back on. Over time, it may take some time. Initially, you might have the weight loss, but then you'll put it back on. And when you do that, we call it weight cycling. So you go down, you go up, you go down, you go up. And it's been seen that that's actually more unhealthy than if you just stayed at the original weight you were at.
Okay, right.
No matter where that weight is, whether it's a higher weight or a lower weight, doing this up and down is more
Again, that's
unhealthy.
all to do with the relationship with the food.
Yeah.
So two things you mentioned there. One, just going to write a no for the other one, but the first one. So previously, and you touched on then that, I call it that 10th principle at the end there, but a relationship I've had with food before, which is less so now, but I went through a phase of looking at it as just fuel.
Yeah.
And so would you consider that not a bad relationship, but not the relationship I would need with food?
I don't think it's a whole relationship. I mean, you can tell yourself that, but do you really not feel pleasure from food?
Yes, but I suppose in calling it fuel, was I trying to disassociate?
Did it come with
enjoyment?
restriction?
Yeah, I probably did. Yeah.
It's just
it came with a box where it was like, I'm exercising, I'm living this life. I suppose I live in certain. When I say live in this life, I mean like X amount of exercise, X amount of calories I'm burning. The relation. Yeah. So
I'm hearing restriction. Yeah.
All right, whatever.
And I guess it's something that I see.
Not paying for this session, by the way.
I'll send you the invoice. That would be diet culture. We're just calling it by any other name.
Okay.
So I suppose in the 90s, probably people caught on that diets don't work. We'd had hundreds of years of different diets. All sorts of radical diets. We'd had Atkins, we'd had keto, we've had keto again. We've had all sorts of wonderful fatty diets. And during the 90s, there was a bit of a body positivity push, and people kind of turned around and said, you know what, I really don't think dieting works. And the word diet fell out of fashion. But there's a multi-billion pounds industry behind people still buying into that. So what happened was the wording changed. So we didn't call it diets anymore. We called it lifestyle changes, or we called it wellness, or we called it biohacking, or whatever it might be. We changed the terminology, and with that came some of these phrases like food is fuel, or strong not skinny. It was the same stuff, it just came in a whole new package. And then got resold to us, and we all bought it, including me. Back then I was weightlifting, I was very much a strong not skinny, posting on Instagram, part of that world. And it's only after doing all this work I can see that I completely bought into that repackaging and didn't see it for it's just the same thing, and they're getting paid for it again.
Yeah. Because you mentioned earlier about protein, and I must say I do have beef with protein, because I feel, and again, I'm obviously no dietitian by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a lot of packaging around that talks about this much protein, this much protein. I imagine if you ask 80% of the population, if not more, it's how much protein do you need in your diet, and they wouldn't know. So to be told there's 30 grams in that, you might only need 20. I don't know, and I'm not saying I know the answer, but I guess we could just spend half an hour just popping at marketing then, but that's how the world turns and people sell products, isn't it?
Absolutely, and there's a whole marketing around this, and that's part of what that first principle is about, is realising that this is a marketing gig, and people are getting you to buy into it by hating your body. You're buying those things because you might want to look different, or you want to keep your weight off, or whatever it is, the reasoning, but they're selling that to you. So
I hadn't really considered it that way, but
and the protein thing is just the current thing. There'll be something else, and there'll be something else, as there always is, where I always remember the gluten one for some reason, in that everybody was told, gluten causes inflammation, so do you want to buy some, gluten-free bread? Do you want gluten-free biscuits? So then there comes the marketing again. So you're given the message that this is bad, and then there's a product that follows. And it's really recognising that, so that you realise this isn't actually about me. This is about this whole approach that we have as a society to obsess over food and bodies. And I guess the protein thing, in terms of what I would be teaching the people that I work with, is yes, in that 10th principle, protein is an important part of our diet. But these guidelines of how much you should have are general guidelines. They might be different for you than they would be for me. So this whole gram per kilo, or whatever it might be, if I have that in a meal, if I had what's too much for my body, I might leave that meal feeling really uncomfortable, whereas I might need a different amount. I might need less, I might need more. Athletes, if they want to recover, then they're going to know if they're not recovering well, then they might need to increase. But we're back to, I'm going to listen to how my body feels, rather than I'm going to follow this number that I have been told I need to.
And the following of the body is part of see, whether we want to call it the principle, but is it part of getting people then to the stage of, I wouldn't say journaling, but they eat a meal and they're consciously sitting thinking, this is how I feel, this is...
Yeah.
Or before they eat, thinking about just, more, I guess, trying to, I guess, maybe remove the noise of this is amazing healthy, or this is amazingly unhealthy, and removing that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we would do a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection on how did I feel before that meal, how did I feel during that meal, how did I feel after that meal, so that you're really guided by your body rather than guided by what you've been told by somebody who probably doesn't care about you and your health. They just care that you buy the product.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
And it's the belief or the outcomes then that ultimately your body will tell you, for want of a better expression, this is sufficient, this is... And
yeah.
Obviously your body's designed to heal. It knows way more than... quote, our brain knows, because it knows how to heal. When you cut yourself, you're not fixing it, is it? The body's doing that. So that same philosophy then in regard to food.
Yes, yeah.
I'll tell you when I need it. I know when you need fuel. You dumbass up there, don't think about it, I'll tell you.
Yeah, you've got
just
that
tune
wisdom.
into that.
Yeah, and listen to that wisdom, which a lot, because we're in diet culture, we are trained, brainwashed, whatever we want to call it, out of doing that. In so many ways, I suppose. It's when you get up for that second helping that somebody goes, "You having more?" You've already had some. Your plate was piled high, and we seem to have this society where we think it's okay to comment on people's food, and we think it's okay to comment on people's bodies, and that's part of diet culture. Is that we've all been given this right that there's a right way to eat and there's a wrong way to eat, and there's a right way to look and a wrong way to look, and therefore we can all comment on it.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered it that way before, and there's those micro aggressions, wrong word, isn't it? But micro comments, I guess, that are just constantly there, aren't they?
They fuel it.
Yeah.
Should I be having more? Should I not be having more? And if you're not in tune with your body, you're probably going to take that person's comment and go, well, I shouldn't have more because they've said.
Or at the same time, if they said go and have some more, you'll follow that comment. So you mentioned earlier when you're born and you intuitively as a baby. So and we talk about the broader conversation around psychology of nature and nurture. Where do you stand in that argument, if you call it an argument? Do you believe, obviously we're particularly talking about food here, but there's a certain amount of nurture in that, I assume, then, that pushes you to perhaps not a dysfunction with food, but the relationship you have with food, for example.
Yeah, I think if we're sticking with just the food, I think nature versus nurture is a huge section. But if we're sticking just with food, I think we do have the ability to override those biological signals because we stop listening to them, or we tune out from them. And I see that all the time, that people have done that, where they don't know when they're hungry, they don't know when they're full, because they have been following perhaps what they've been told. Or there's also there's a theory called restraint theory. So if you've been told this food is bad and you can't have it, as humans, we have a sense of autonomy where we're like, well, I'm going to have it. But when we have that sense of restriction of like, well, I shouldn't, the cravings and everything goes up and up and up. And then eventually we crack and we have it, and then we go, oh, I didn't have control. And we only do this with food. It's really interesting. If we're looking at the nature versus nurture, if we think about when you need to go to the bathroom, so you get the signals from your body, I need to go to the bathroom, and you get up and you go. You don't go, oh, should I go to the bathroom? Should I not go to the bathroom? Is it good to go to the bathroom? And you've not got somebody else commenting going, you go to the bathroom too much, do you know that? But for some reason we have all adopted this attitude, and diet culture is the reason, that we have more control over that biological nature than we do other things. Same for breathing. If you tried to restrict your breathing, your body would soon complain and you would breathe, and yet we don't have breathing plans for everybody to be on, but we do when it comes to food.
Interesting. So can I move? Earlier you mentioned about mindfulness.
Yes.
just maybe talk a bit about that work. So I don't know whether you know Mike Cooley.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've done a course of Mike's a couple of years ago now, a 6-week course, and again, it's something I'd like to. I know maybe you're coming at mindfulness from a slightly different place. I don't know, but so yeah. Rather than me talking, I'm not here.
What would you like to know about?
Well, just how I suppose it feeds into the no pun intended.
Yeah.
Thank you. How it feeds into the conversation around this relationships and.
Yeah. I suppose when it comes to what we were talking about how do I feel before a meal, how do I feel during a meal, how do I feel after a meal, you can't do that tuning in without some level of mindfulness.
Okay.
If you're...
So again, this will be... Sorry, go.
Go.
No, you go.
If you're on your phone or you're watching the TV or you're maybe on the laptop whilst you're eating... How can you be mindful of those body sensations that tell you how you're feeling about that food or how full you're feeling? You can't. So there is an aspect of mindfulness when it comes to tuning in, and that you have to be mindful to tune in.
Yeah. So and it's, I think I've read the word to myself, present.
Yes.
That's the key, I guess. So sometimes there's maybe a perception of I was chatting to someone yesterday, but they might call it woo-woo, the mindfulness, which is obviously not what I would call it, but people might. But even this is more basic, which is just being present and going, how do I feel? How did that make me feel?
Yeah, I'm not woo-woo at all, and I think I'm very clear with my clients about that. I'm very much about practical, that mindfulness can be done practically without the woo-woo, and some people like the woo-woo. It's all about personal preference. When it comes to the food side, I would say a lot of the mindfulness is about that ability to tune in, to be present, to be in the moment with the food. And I suppose part of mindfulness is being able to come away from the other noise that is in your mind. And this is also a certain aspect of acceptance and commitment therapy that I was talking about earlier, is when my clients are possibly eating a certain food, particularly if it's a forbidden food that they've restricted in the past, they're going to have a lot of noise going on in their head while that's happening, of like, oh, I'm going to lose control, or I shouldn't be eating this. All of those past beliefs are going to be popping up, and it's the ability to notice that they're present and be aware of them. We're not going to ignore them. We're not going to distract from them. We're going to be aware of them, and we're also going to be aware of the importance of what we're doing and what's in front of us.
I feel like I need therapy on food. Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Got another customer.
Yeah. So perhaps just to finish off, because time flies, doesn't it? Perhaps for people listening, sort of maybe aside from if they obviously want to reach out, but more maybe simple tips or advice. And I guess I'm going to walk away with certainly one from what you've just said there, which is to think more about how I feel before, when I want to eat, as I'm eating, and after. But perhaps other things that people can, in this food space and psychology, that people can take away. Yeah,
I would absolutely think about the diet culture part, because I think it has such an influence. We're swimming in it, and we don't realise that we're swimming in it. Increasing awareness about that, about when you're scrolling on your social media, what body types are coming up that you're seeing? Are you seeing just one type of body, or are you seeing a diverse feed of different bodies? And I would think about diversifying that feed. And whilst you're scrolling through that, are there certain people or are there certain bodies that come up on your feed that make you feel bad about your own body? And I would question whether do you need to see those? Can you press the unfollow or the mute, or I don't want to see this? Even mine at the moment, I refer to myself sometimes as an anti-diet psychologist, because I see the damage that diets do and the research behind diets don't work. And as an anti-diet psychologist, which I'm very out there about, I still get on my feed, well, you can do this diet and in 10 days, miracles will happen. And I will go through and I will unclick that I don't want to see that, because it doesn't serve me. It fuels back into diet culture to make me feel bad about my body, and that I've got something that I need to fix ultimately. So curating the environment that you want, I think, is really, really important. And maybe just to link back to hopefully reflecting on something I said earlier when I talk about one's own responsibility for mental health. That to me is the type of example where
you're cognitively aware that this messaging or this behaviour towards me is wrong and I need to adjust that, rather than, which to me is sort of self looking after one's mental health, because you're trying to change your relationship. So that was, I suppose, the point. I was, not to you particularly, but to people listening, that it was that when I talk about that self, Look, people obviously, and I'm definitely not here to say anything different.
And I think it's important to remember that everything is different for different people. You know what works for you. I'm not here to say you should never diet again, you should never ever go on an exercise plan. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying you know what is good for your body, what feels good in your body, what does damage to your body, and listen to that.
I just go back to the same point of it's a lot of that self-responsibility, isn't it? It's self-responsibility that taking, and I'll take that away, taking that time to sit down and think about, this is what I'm cooking, this is what I'm going to eat, this is how I feel, and changing that relationship. And that's on me, isn't it, ultimately? That self-responsibility. And you can take that just as what you want to do. Yeah. And then some people take that a little bit further, where they actually want to start fighting against weight stigma. And some people call it fatphobia, but I don't think phobia is really the word, because that makes it feel like you're scared, rather than actually we live in a society that is anti-fat. I prefer to think of it as anti-fat or weight stigma rather than fat phobia, but the terms are interchangeable. And it's up to you if you want to take on a battle with that, in a social justice type of way, or whether you can just do that for yourself and that's enough for you to have resilience. Yeah. And do you, just one final one, do you run, you've obviously got clients and one-on-ones, do you run or have environments where humans with similar challenges can
come
talk
together? Yeah. Well, that's ultimately the aim with my Life for Everybody space. Is on my page I will share facts, I'll share research, I'll share tidbits, and all of that is free. There's also a Facebook group where people can come in, and I'll share things in there, and other people will share their stuff, and then the aim is, I'm planning on really getting going with all of this next year, so there'll be different things for different people on different spectrums, I suppose. Some people will come to me just with body image and not with the food stuff, and some people will come with both, either. So next year I'm planning to run like some body respect, body kindness spaces, and then I'll also have food spaces, and then there'll be a mingling of both if people feel like they have issues with both.
Great.
Yeah,
very good.
That's a plan.
Yeah, we'll put some of the links in the contents as well. So amazing, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time. Really interesting chat. I'm sure we're going a lot longer, but conscious of time. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's word out from Martin.
Poor flimsy humans. Don't you wish you were flawless like me? A towering inferno of physical perfection?
I hate to pop your blimp-like ego, but you're not perfect.